Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today I would like to talk about the fact that I love to reread books, which I have started doing in the past year or so, more than ever. And I think that I would like to kind of show you some books that I have reread in the past, just to let you know, but also talk about my reasoning behind rereading those books, but also show you a selection of books that I see myself rereading in the very near future. The thing is that I know that there are so many books out there in the world, and there's no way that we are ever going to read all of those books on our to-be-read list. Books keep being published every year, so many titles, and so many of those titles sound so good to us, but there's just no way that we're ever going to read all of those books that we really want to read. At least not when it comes to me, because I have hundreds and hundreds of books that sound interesting to me. The reason why I'm saying this is because this is part of my reasoning for rereading books. Even though I don't really have time to reread books, if I want to get to as many of the other books I want to read, I still do it because my reasoning is that I will never be able to read all of those new books anyway. So instead of trying, I prefer to sometimes dive back into a story which I've already read, already loved, and that I want to revisit just to feel good or just to rediscover the story that I've forgotten part of. There are so many reasons why I decide to reread a book. For instance, last year I reread a book that I wasn't loving the first time I read it, and that was The Master and Margarita by Michael Bulgakov. I reread that one because it's a classic. I own it. I remember reading it a few years ago and not really getting much of the story, even though I was quite fascinated with it. So I wanted to revisit it just to see if I would be able to kind of understand it better, and I was able to do that. It's still not a favorite read of mine, but I don't regret rereading it. Another book I reread last year is A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara. I can't remember if it was this year or last year. Anyway, that one I reread because it's one of my favorite books, and I'd actually forgotten quite a lot of the story. I mean, I remember the overall plot and the characters, but I couldn't remember the details and where the story was going. So that one was a really great experience because I loved it so much. Also the second time around, and I rediscovered these characters that I already knew but had forgotten partly. The other day I went to my parents and I found two books which I actually gave to my mother a few years ago when I was cleaning out my shelves. I said to her, "These books I love. Would you like to receive them, read them, keep them, just because I know they would be for you?" And she said yes, obviously. She still had the books. She hasn't read them yet for some reason, but I saw them the other day and I was like, I knew that those were some books that I really wanted to reread. First one I'm actually rereading right now, and that is Fate and Furies by Lauren Groff. I wanted to reread this one because it's one of those titles that I remember the overall story from, but I don't remember the particulars, and it's one of my favorite books. At least that's what I like to say. So I really think this one deserves a reread. I'm over halfway through it, and that's the thing about rereading. It's still really good. It's still a favorite of mine, and I decided to pick up this one now because I just finished a new book, a book I hadn't read previously, and that book was very disappointing. So I needed a pick-me-up. I needed something that I knew I was going to love and that I wanted to really dive into and forget about that other book. So this one was the book that did that for me. The other book I found at my mother's is The Interestings by Meg Wolitzer. I really want to dive into this one again as well, because it's basically this for the same reason as the other one. I remember it being my favorite, but I don't remember much of the actual story. But actually, let's just go through a few of those books that I see myself rereading in the near future. I have a classic on top of my stack, and that is Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. I recently reread her sister's The Tenant of Wildfell Hall by Anne Bronte, And this one was an interesting reread. I will get more into it in my April wrap-up. It was definitely a good reread, that's for sure. But I want to reread this one because it's a classic and I honestly don't remember what the intrigue is about. So many people are talking about this book being dark and mysterious and macabre, and I don't remember why that is. I do remember faintly a man and his violent behavior, but that's not enough for me. I really want to know what was it about this book that makes it so dark to people. I really can't remember. It's definitely one I want to reread. I think I read it a few years ago, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and maybe I also read it when I was a teenager or in my late teens, and I can't remember too much of this book, that's for sure. And then we have another modern classic, I would say it is. I don't know if it's modern, but it's John Steinbeck. You know I love him. I, a few years ago, read this book for the first time, The Grapes of Wrath. I loved it. It's one of my favorite books, and also John Steinbeck is one of my favorite authors. I have reread his East of Eden. That rereading was just amazing. So this one has to be reread as well because I really want to. It's not like it has to be reread, but in my heart it does. And then we have a book that I read for the first time when I was at university. I borrowed it from a friend of mine, read it over a summer and loved it. Actually, this one I also read over a summer, and I want to reread it over another summer. So I think next summer will be it, and that goes for the next book as well, which is The House of the Spirits by Isabel Allende. Now this one, it's been probably 10 years since I read it the first time, and I've also watched the movie since then, but that was also a few years ago. So once again, I don't remember all the particulars. I mean, it's a very big book and it's got a very small font, so a lot must be happening, which I don't remember. But I just really want to get back to that feeling of it being summer and me diving into a book, being totally entranced by it and wanting to keep on reading. So I think that book will also do that for me. And the very last book I would like to mention is another book I found at my mother's. She had just been at a bargain sale, found this book, bought it, and then I saw it and grabbed it and asked her if I could have it. And sweet as my mother is, she said, "Of course, darling." So I found Norwegian Wood by Haruki Murakami. This book is my favorite book of his. I mean, I read it as my very first book by Murakami when I was in my 20s, I think. And it was the book that made me fall in love with him, and since then I've read most of his other books. I've also reread his 1Q84. I'm not trying to brag here, I'm just saying that book was also such an amazing reading experience to visit again. But anyway, I found this, I grabbed it. I'm so thrilled that I now have it to reread, because this book is just beautiful. I remember it being a love story. It's also magical realism, as we know Murakami, and I just love it. I don't know if this video made any sense at all. The reason for me doing it is because I feel inspired to reread a lot these days. Maybe it's because of the coronavirus. We are stuck at home reading the books we have on our shelves. My library is closed still, and I just see myself rereading some of my favorite books that I have behind me, and this is the perfect opportunity to do so, even though I would have been rereading anyway, coronavirus or not. So that's it for this video. Maybe I inspired some of you to pick up a book again and read it, but nevertheless, I hope you enjoyed this video, and until my next one, happy rereading.